All right, here's a video for 5.1.1. I'll try to go quickly. During the whole video, I'm going to try to go pretty quick, but I also expect you to kind of pause and make sure that you're trying these problems beforehand so you really get a good feel and understanding for this. So, anyway, Mrs. Seibel visits the school bake sale and wants to buy some brownies. She finds a brownie pan that's 2/3 full. Mrs. Seibel decides to buy half of the brownies that are left. I'm going to use different colors to help identify all of this or whatever, but remember that Mrs. Seibel purchased a part of those 2/3. How much of a whole pan does Mrs. Seibel buy? In other words, what is a half of 2/3? So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to draw that pan that's 2/3 full, okay? Nothing about what I'm going to do is going to be perfect about it, but it's going to be enough of a representation, hopefully, there we go, that we can see that 2/3, right? Now she has half of that 2/3, half of the 2/3, so she has half of that, right? So let's shade in that half, and you can kind of see that green in there, right? There we go. So how much of the original, how much of the whole pan does Mrs. Seibel buy? Well, she buys, what would you say, 2 pieces? She does buy 2 pieces, right? But out of how much, right? And this is the important part, I think, is if you take and just extend your line right there, that half line that we talked about earlier, we now have one, on the top, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. And Mrs. Seibel buys 2 of those 6 pieces, or 1/3 of the original brownies, original amount of brownies. Okay, 2/3 of that. So our focus today is to use what we call, I guess it's kind of like the brownie pan method, right? We can divide our fractions up to be represented in these rectangles. In this case, we think of it like a brownie pan to be able to solve this, okay? So now I'm going to try to move just a touch quicker as we kind of go through this, right? Mrs. Bowman's making a pan of lasagna. And after she and her husband eat, 3/4 of the pan is left. When her 2 sons come home, they eat half of what's left. How much of the whole pan do her sons eat? So 3/4 of the pan is left. I encourage you to make all of those in one direction. It's very easy for you to go like this, but it's very hard to divide. So I would not encourage you to do that. So there we go. There is it divided into fourths, and she said, or they said that 3/4 of that was left over, right? Then her 2 sons came home and ate half of what's left. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose to divide what's left in half, and they eat half of what's left. And now we can shade that whole half, because that's what they were attempting to eat, right? That half. But what we want to do is key in on which ones are double shaded, right? Which ones are double shaded? And that's, we have 1. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. Sorry. 1, 2, 3. I'm just going to use that as my fraction. 3 out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. So they ate 3/8 of the lasagna. All right. Mrs. Strahota ordered a cake for her daughter's birthday. After the birthday party, 2/7 of the original cake was left. She decides to eat 1/4 of what's left. How much of the original cake did Mrs. Strahota eat? All right, so Mrs. Strahota ordered that cake, and 2/7 of the cake was left. Okay, so this is going to be hard to draw, but I'm going to do the best I can to draw this 2/7 here, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so it's not perfect, but I'll take it. All right. Then, so 2/7 of that. Let's make sure we shade that 2/7. There we go. Then what happens? she decides to eat 1/4 of what's left. Okay, so what we're going to do is divide the whole thing by fourths. So we'll divide that in half, that, and that. And what does she eat? She eats 1/4 of that, so that's the whole thing that she eats. But we only concern ourselves with what's actually left, or in other words, what did she actually eat? And the only part she actually ate was 2 pieces. So 2 out of what? How many? Well, instead of counting all of these individually, we recognize that this is a 4 by 7 array, or 28 total pieces. We can reduce that fraction by dividing the top by 2 and the bottom by 2 to get an answer of 1/14. She eats 1/14 of the cake. Riley, Morgan, and Reggie were making plans for a mural on the side of their local community center. They needed to clean and seal the wall before painting the mural. Riley agreed to prepare half of the area. You know what? Let's just make that right now for Riley. Show what Riley does. So Riley decides, I'm going to do half of that, right? And then Morgan agreed to clean and seal 1/3 of the area. And Reggie agreed to finish the remaining 1/6 of the area. Okay, so let's get over here. Let's do Morgan. Morgan did 1/3 of the area. Now, this isn't going to exactly look like the pictures line up, because I'm more concerned about dividing this out into nice, beautiful fractions versus making sure that I have them looking correct, right? And then Reggie did 1/6 of that the area, right? So let's divide that into half, and then 1, 2, this into thirds. So Reggie did 1/6. And I know that it looks like Reggie and Riley did the same part. That's not what I'm worried about. I'm more worried about dividing these up into the nice pieces. A few days later, none of them had completed their section. Riley had completed 1/3 of his part. Okay, so 1/3 of his part. So let's go to, let's just use a different color for all of this. Maybe this pink would be good. 1/3. So let's divide that into thirds. Right there, and did 1/3 of that, so there it is. Morgan had completed 5/6 of her part, so we have divided that, and we got 1, and there's my divided into 6, and let's do 5/6 of that. And then let's go to Reggie. Reggie had completed 2/3 of his part. Okay, so 2/3. So 1/3, 2, and 3/3. Reggie did that part, right? All right, what fraction of the total mural did each person complete? Show your evidence on the diagrams below. Okay, so let's look at this. Riley had completed 1 out of how many pieces? 1/6. Morgan had completed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 out of, that is a 3 by 6, so that's 18 pieces. And then Reggie did 1 out of, that is a 3 by, was that a 6th? Yes, 3 by 6, so that's 18 pieces there. Okay. By the way, who did more? That's interesting. Reggie did 1/18 and Morgan did 5/18. So clearly Morgan did more than Reggie. But what about Riley, right? How much did Riley actually do? Let's change that. Let's multiply by a giant 1 of 3/3, and that answer is 3/18. So who did the most? Morgan. Right? Morgan did the most. And you know what's interesting? If you read everything up above, it's hard to determine that using fractions who did more, right? Riley did 1/3 of the area, or no, agreed to do half, but only did 1/3 of that, right? 1/3 and a half. That sounds big in a way, right? Morgan, on the other hand, decided to do 1/3, to seal 1/3 of the area, right? And then what did Morgan do after that? Completed 5/6 of that, right? And then Reggie had agreed to do 1/6, which seems like a small amount, but did 2/3 of that. Oh, I messed up Reggie, didn't I? Let's fix Reggie real quick. Didn't I? Reggie completed 2/3 of that part. Let me fix that. Oops. So that's 2. There we go. 2/18. My bad. My bad. Completed 2/3 of that. Hopefully you caught that as we were going through. Okay. Still Morgan did more though. All right. So let's wrap this up. In the first lesson, Mrs. Seibel bought a half of the brownie pan mix that was 2/3 full, or half of 2/3. When mathematicians write half of 2/3, they mean multiplication, or 1/2 times 2/3. When you multiply a fraction by a fraction, you are finding a part of a part. In this lesson, you completed the problems shown in the table below. How can you find the answer to each problem without drawing a visual? Okay, so these are all multiplications, and I'm going to just move this up. There we go. So what's a better way for us to do that? Well, if we go back to Mrs. Seibel, way at the top, that was 1/3 or 2/6, right? The answer was 2/6 or 1/3. And how do we connect that to what we did? Well, when we look at this, we can say 1/2 times 2/3 is 1 times 2 over 2 times 3, which is 2/6. There's my answer, right? And we can reduce that to 1/3. Let's look at this next one, right? That was Mrs. Bowman. We can do this as 2/3 times 3/4, right? 2 times 3 is the top, the numerator, and then 3 times 4 to do the denominator, and we get 6/12, which is 1/2, right? Did I reduce that earlier? Wait, Mrs. Bowman had 3/8, 3/4, 1/2. Did I mess something up down here? Oh, that's because Mrs. Bowman did not do exactly 2/3 and 3/4. So that's not the same problem as up above. That's okay, we'll ignore that for now. And here we have 1/3 times 1/2, right? 1/3 times 1/2, that is 1 times 1 and 3 times 2. And in here we have 5/6 times 1/3. 5 times 1 is 5. 6 times 3 is 18. And for the last one, we have 2/3 times 1/6, and it's easier to see these. That's why I'm rewriting these, right? Again, just as a kind of a quick reminder, that's 2 times 1 over 3 times 6, and 2 times 1 is 2, and 3 times 6 is 18, which happens to be 1/9. Okay? If you have any other questions, please let me know. Today is all about fraction multiplication.